He's
Ewers.
redshirting.
I think
Yep.
Ewers is a Heisman dark horse. I think he's a first round
Ooh.
talent, maybe.
Who's
I
that?
think Ewers is going to ball out. Quinn Ewers,
Well,
Texas.
yeah,
Ooh.
because the Big
Because
12
look at his
sucks.
receiver core. He's
Because
got
the
the
Big
best
12
receiver
sucks.
core in college football,
Probably. Yeah.
next to Washington.
And
And I
LSU.
guess you could say Ohio State's in there. I guess
Wait,
they got a
who
few
has
good
the best
receivers.
receiving? Who has the best receiving core in the country?
Washington Huskies,
Probably
Oregon.
Washington.
No,
Texas.
no, no.
Just because Ohio State has the best receiver does not mean that they
They
have the
have
best receiving core.
they have two receivers that are projected first round
Florida
picks.
State's got a really good
Okay, and
core.
Jackson Smith and Jigba was projected top 5 last year, and he went 20.
It doesn't matter. It's a top. I'm just saying, first round picks. You have two first
Okay,
rounders.
but
But
after
three,
Abuka and Harrison Jr., if one of them goes down, do you feel less confident that the guys can step up?
Yeah,
Washington has
yeah.
three first round receivers.
That's true. That's true.
Roma Dunze, uh, God damn it, Polk,
Big
and McMillan.
Big Ten championship odds
Is
still.
So
is Julian Fleming a first round wide receiver?
Is
no,
he
but
going
he's
this
only a
year?
sophomore.
Hmm. I didn't know if he was going or not.
He's the number 3, right? Probably.
Yeah, but there's actually rumors that Xavier Johnson, or it's going to be like Xavier Johnson, Julian Fleming, and Carnell Tate. Like one of them are like they're going to split that third, and then apparently Emeka's moving into the slot.
I need to interject. Updated August 12th at 1:52 p.m. Big Ten and Las Vegas officials are in discussion to host a championship conference game at Allegiant Stadium.
Yep,
Gross.
gross.
So
Oh,
there's,
West Coast advantage.
yeah, I mean, but
Gross.
there's topics. Harbaugh suspension, McNamara's hurt.
Oh, we're
Big
we're
Ten played in the conference title game.
we're going, man. We're already live.
I understand that,
So,
but
Oregon and
things to cover
Washington.
today.
Yep, Oregon and Washington joined the Big Ten. We got into it a little bit last time. Last week talked more financials, but let's just talk about like what does this mean like scheduling wise, and what does this like truly mean for as like Oregon and Washington leaving the Pac-12 as charter members. When the Pac-12 was formed back in 1915, and now they're leaving to join the Big Ten, going along with USC and UCLA.
I think it's a playoff thing. I think Oregon, them as a from their standpoint, not looking at the Big Ten standpoint, from there as a team standpoint, I think it helps them put them back in the conversation more so for a playoff every single year, knowing that if they run the Big Ten and have one or two losses, there's a good shot, regardless of who they play non-conference, if that we even play non-conference anymore with these additions.
18
But it
teams,
gives
yeah.
it, but it gives them a legit bigger advantage because let's be honest, if they stayed in the Pac 12 without USC and UCLA, their conference is not so good.
I mean, the Pac-12 as it is super top heavy. Not that most conferences aren't, but you're going to get more consistent
Uh,
competition in the across the side of the board.
I mean, well, now with all these additions, I feel like it's more like the SEC and Big Ten are now more evenly matched. Because, I
More
mean,
parity means different teams coming around.
yeah, but like, I mean, like the Big Ten, for instance, I mean, you could go back to what 2013, 2014. I mean, Ohio State, really was the odds-on favorite almost every one of those years to win the Big Ten. So there
They're
wasn't
still the
much.
favorite to win the Big
Yeah,
Ten now.
yeah, and they're
Nothing
still
changed,
changed.
but they
Yeah,
lose. They
but
haven't
but
in the last 2 years.
yeah, but like what I'm saying though is just like it's just like there's not that like I think like that top heaviness though. Even like Alabama's favorite to win the SEC every year, right? Um, Maybe
this year.
not this
Except for
year.
the last couple years, maybe.
Yeah, maybe not the last couple, but like, I mean, you're starting to see like now a couple teams are challenging Alabama more consistently. Ohio State's now getting more competition in the Big
Yeah.
Ten.
Programs are raising their standards.
Exactly.
Michigan and Penn State have elevated.
Because
Georgia,
Ohio State, because Ohio
LSU
State,
elevated.
exactly, because Alabama and Ohio State were just there, and Clemson, we're just up there
and
above,
Clemson, yeah.
beyond everybody else, right? And so, I mean, that's just, I think like when you're talking about
the ACC has a tier 1 school going into next year.
no,
Florida State's going to be the most competitive and most likely in the
Right.
Final Four, but the ACC doesn't really have a conference staple. Miami's not good anymore. Florida State's not consistent. Clemson's fallen off a couple years.
exactly,
I think they're the next domino. I think the ACC is going to fall next.
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
I
then,
mean, I think it makes sense.
but
I mean,
like, but I think when you bring in like, now that like Texas and Oklahoma have joined the SEC, you have UCLA, Oregon, USC, and Washington joining the Big Ten. I feel like you're going to have way more competition, and you're going to see a lot more parity within those conferences of not seeing the same teams that we saw, 3 years in a row in Indianapolis, right? Or
If it's in Indianapolis.
We'll see a few more.
yeah.
Yeah.
You'll just see better matchups. You'll just see better
Mhm.
matchups. You'll just see a better matchup because you're going to have two teams who either played each other once before the season, either on a home field or an away game, and they're going to play each other again, whether it be whoever
Neutral
it is,
field,
or you're
right.
going to see a matchup of good teams that should have been in the regular season,
But now you
duke
get
it
them in
out.
the championship game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I still
And the
think the
games-
SEC is going to have a bias, though. I mean,
Well,
there's always been, there always will be.
And I think really until you have like another conference like the Big Ten, until the Big Ten goes out there and wins 4 or 5 national titles in a row as a conference, that's the only way you're going to break that bias.
You have to prove that you're as good as they are.
Yep.
You have to prove that you can make as much money as they do.
Well,
money. The bias is about the money.
There's 2 schools in the Big Ten that make more than the 2 top SEC schools. Ohio State and Michigan combined make
but
more
a lot of that
than
has to do
Georgia
with their
and
stadium
SEC.
holds 30,000 more people.
But now you got to think also about the
And
fact
our alumni
that,
associations are way bigger.
but now they also picked up Texas and Oklahoma, which have
Texas is the biggest
boatload
brand
of cash.
in football.
Yeah, it's a huge.
Texas, yeah.
It's a huge.
I mean, they almost signed $1 billion contract with ESPN for their own network. I mean, that if that doesn't tell you that they're the biggest brand in football, but I mean, still, regardless, the SEC to me is not a better conference. It's just they have the pristine of winning national titles because of Alabama. If Nick Saban wasn't at Alabama and
For the past
LSU,
20 years.
I mean, LSU
Yeah,
won a
you're not
title once every 4 years when the Sugar Bowl hosted the national championship game. It just seemed like they were always there and reloaded every 4 years. Every 4 years they were playing a home game for a national championship.
Literally,
But,
they
I mean,
did.
Right.
Hated that
but I
so
mean,
much.
in between, you had Alabama was good every year. And so the last couple of years, you've had Ohio State and Michigan that have been able to basically compete and basically say that they're just as good. Obviously, not winning the national title, coming close, whatever, regardless. But still, you're still, Michigan and Ohio State have been there. They've been the same cream of the crop since the playoffs started. It's just they don't get it. They just don't get as much love. I say typically it's because nobody likes Harbaugh, and the refs hate him, conferences hate him. That's what it is to me now. But we could go back and forth and say in 2006, Michigan and Ohio State were the 2 best teams, played the best game. Nobody played with Ohio State that year, not a single team, and we lost by a field goal on the road. To me, they were the best team, but they put Florida in, and Florida dismantled Ohio State. So,
Which
it's
was the beginning of the end, ultimately.
Yeah, which started it all.
Right, basically.
Now we're here
Not taking
17
anything
years
away
later.
from that Florida team
Yeah.
because that Florida team was disgusting, but
Loaded.
but that's another story. But
Yeah,
I mean,
look,
I just think the SEC. I mean,
but look what
I
that's
just think-
caused 17 years later.
Oh,
17 years
1000%.
later, you've added 7 teams to the Big Ten. You've taken and added, 4 teams to the SEC. And then all this, they've just championship after championship, money after money, hand over fist.
but the
Between
SEC is so top heavy.
But like,
Always been.
Alabama,
there's like a few
LSU,
years.
Georgia, Florida. I mean,
There's a
there's
couple
4
of
Big
years
Ten
though.
teams that are decent.
You're not wrong, but like I remember there's a few years where like there was like a one-loss Ohio State team, a one-loss SEC team, or a one-loss Michigan team, and a one-loss like SEC team in the BCS era, and they would always get the nod over us. Or you would have like the one-loss Florida State team, and they would get the nod, and it was always
That's when
Well, and
Ohio
a
State
lot
was
of that-
losing to unranked Iowa,
Oh, yeah,
unranked Purdue.
You would-
100%. But a lot of that has to do with the SEC's format was not. They loaded up on one side. They had both sides were pretty solid, so you were ending up getting a one-loss Florida team versus an undefeated Alabama team. And
Right.
for the Big Ten, you were getting Ohio State, Wisconsin. Now, don't take anything from Wisconsin, but a top 25 win is not the same as a top 5 win the week before they decide the BCS National Championship.
Well, right, but I guess like my always thought process was like, who's to say like those teams were actually better than these other teams? You know what I mean? Because like you never really got to see them play. And to Corey's point, though, where I was going with this was to Corey's point was, I think that if you take the middle crop of the Big Ten against the middle crop of the SEC, I think the Big Ten would do way better in that scenario. Like if you did an SEC Big Ten challenge and you had even matchups across the board, I think the Big Ten would win that matchup conference wise. Even as they stand right now before the teams are added.
I mean, even another game, I think, or another situation that didn't help these dominoes as they've fallen for the last 16, 17 years now. Alabama, Notre Dame in the 2013 national championship game. Notre Dame didn't deserve to be there. Ohio State's on punishment. Ohio State's undefeated. And that's a really strong Ohio State team that potentially stifles another Nick Saban team.
Well, first off, are you talking 2012?
Or yeah, I didn't. Yeah,
2012
Notre Dame was undefeated.
Oh, Notre Dame would have been undefeated, so they would have been in, and it would have been Ohio State, Notre Dame, and we would have won. But we would have won 2 national titles
Yeah,
in
Alabama
3
had one
years.
loss.
And
Yeah, that's my mistake. I'm looking at it wrong.
But we would
But
have had
still,
2 national titles in 3 years, and you could have, at that point, you would have, and Coach
I don't
Zach
think it's
Smith.
Ohio State though.
No, but like Coach Zach Smith was talking about this. He goes, the worst move Ohio State did was not taking a bowl ban in 2011, because if you take the bowl ban then, you don't have the bowl ban in 2012. And what does that do for the conference winning 2 out of 3 titles? He goes, that not only is bolsters Ohio State's program, but what does that do for your conference at the same time?
Plus, you would have been in 5 of the BC or 4 or 5 of the BCS title games.
Right.
But again, it's never been about Ohio State. Ohio State has been top 5 for the last 20 years.
No,
that's never
but
been an issue. Yes, it would have changed the outlook of the conference, but when you look at it for the last 20, if you look for the last 20 years, the SEC has had way more teams than the Big Ten that have been contenders. The Big Ten have had Ohio State and Michigan. Penn State maybe once, Michigan State maybe once. But in the SEC, you sure have Georgia and Alabama, of course, but you also have Florida. You also had LSU. You also have other teams that have been. Ole Miss was good one year when they had a top 10 recruiting class. I mean, you have a bunch of teams in the SEC that Auburn won. You had a bunch of teams that were good for a long period of time. Yeah, they maybe had 1 or 2 losses and didn't play for a national title, but they also didn't have 6 losses like Rutgers, 7 losses like Rutgers every year. Yeah, you had a few of those teams, but you had 10 SEC teams in the top 25 and you had 3 Big Ten teams.
So interesting here. I'm not sure it's going to back or state anything else. I'm not going off of record. Everyone knows what the records are. Appearances by conference. The SEC, the ACC, and the Big Ten in the Final Four era have all put 3 different teams in the Final Four.
Yep.
The SEC has 11 Final Four appearances. The ACC has 8 Final Four appearances, and the Big Ten has 8 Final Four appearances.
Well, right. And how many times did the SEC have 2 teams in the Final Four era?
Oh yeah,
probably 5
2
of those
teams in
years.
the Final Four.
3 at least.
Let's
Because
see
Georgia and
here.
Alabama played each other back-to-back years. 1 year in the semifinal,
Yeah,
and then in
that's
the play,
that's
and then
twice.
and then in
But then
the
17,
LSU beat Alabama 12-9, or
no, but that
9
was
to
that was in
6.
BCS. That was BCS. That was 2011.
Yeah, if you look at the
Because that was in
at
the
the
Sugar Bowl.
the Final Four, the SEC's only put 2 teams in twice, unless I'm just not seeing something.
No, you're
20,
right. It's twice.
2017-18 and
Yep.
then 21-22. Alabama,
Seems
Cincinnati,
like there's
Georgia,
been more.
Michigan.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all, but
But it was
yeah,
always
it's in
Didn't
the
LSU and Alabama both make it?
well, but like to be fair though, and honestly, we didn't. The Big Ten didn't do themselves any favors this year. They put us in. They gave us a chance. They had 2 teams in, and we didn't do our jobs. We didn't beat the teams that we had to beat to go have an all Big Ten championship game,
I mean, or even just have one.
or have one, or just have
To
one
play.
win to play for it. We didn't even do our job.
I mean, the Big Ten's put a team
So-
in every year except
There was one.
17-18 and 18-19.
No, we had 19. 19 was
18-19.
yeah, it was.
Alabama,
No, you
Clemson, Oklahoma, Notre Dame.
Yeah, you
Oh,
had
yeah, yeah.
Oklahoma,
Oh,
Notre
and
Dame. Notre Dame takes the spot of the Big Ten.
I guess we were considered 1920 because then 2021 would have
Right.
been the COVID year. Yeah.
Right. And
I was
you
gonna
were
say-
in both of those.
But I mean, I think
Should've played for
back
back-to-back
to
titles.
back to adding Oregon
Again, yeah.
and Washington. I think Oregon is the bigger move than Washington, not taking anything away from Washington. But Oregon is a brand that is a bigger brand like USC, like UCLA. So they're going to bring in more money. Plus, I mean, Michigan played Oregon in the Rose Bowl. Ohio State played Oregon in the Rose Bowl. They're
We played them for a national title in the first ever college football playoff.
high profile game. So
Yeah.
It adds to the Big Four. I mean, it just makes Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Oregon
USC.
comparable to, yeah, I mean, USC, even if you take out Penn State. I mean, you still have a Big Four now in the Big Ten. You've got a Big Four in the SEC. And then you've got a couple extra, which, your Auburns and your Tennessees, if they're still hanging around. Texas A&M should be higher.
Drew, what's your opinion? You've been a little quiet over there.
Well,
you're like, on what?
on what, dude?
I don't know. I'm a roast. Base me.
On the Oregon, I think Oregon needs to come in, and I think Oregon needs to establish a rivalry with Maryland, and we will call it the Apparel Bowl, as it is Nike versus Under Armour. Maryland is the main Under Armour school.
Right.
So I think we ought to do that. I think, Oregon's the bigger brand nationally. Washington has a ton of prestige behind it, but they had a lot of bad years. I think.
What does this do for recruiting, Drew? Like, what do you think this does for the recruiting? Like, getting Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State.
I think it helps the West Coast teams more than it helps our teams. I think it helps the West Coast grab more East Coast players, get into Florida and Ohio and Georgia. obviously, I think it can help Penn State. Penn State will profit from this for sure, going out to California and Oregon and Washington, Arizona. But I don't think it's going to matter. I think eventually it's just not going to matter for Rutgers, Indiana, Purdue, Northwestern. I think the days of seeing any of these teams in a conference title game are dead. I don't think we'll ever see Purdue there again. We'll never see Northwestern in the title game again. So it's definitely pros and cons. Depends who you're a fan of, I guess.
It's
I
definitely
don't think it
gonna.
helps recruiting at all. Recruiting's dead. Recruiting is all about who can give the most money
Not
to
wrong.
the person. I mean, yeah, you still have a few players out there who are like, okay, like my dad went to Ohio State, so I want to go to Ohio State, or things like that. But I mean, outside of that, not to be rude, but if I was an East Coast kid and I was a 5-star recruit and USC or Oregon came calling, I'm going to nice weather. I mean, and plus Oregon and USC are going to give you more money anyway, based just because of where you're located.
No, they're going to have to get you out there. They're going to have to get you established. They're going to have to really make it to you, not just the weather, but they're going to have to make so you want to go to play for them.
True.
Look at the quarterback. Look at the quarterback from Michigan who went to UCLA. He took a chunk.
I still think there is kids out there, though. Corey, you're not wrong. I mean, that is going to be a big part for some kids. But there are still kids out there that want to go to the schools that are going to develop them for that next level at their positions. And I think
also depends. It also depends on your position. I mean, if you're a quarterback, why wouldn't you want to go play for Lincoln Riley?
You're not wrong.
I mean, look at his track record. Look at the NFL quarterbacks that Lincoln Riley developed. Look at them in there. They've been number 1 picks. I mean, can't argue with it. I mean, nothing against Ryan Day and Ohio State.
One of them shouldn't have been a number 1 pick, but that's a different conversation.
I mean, but he had what?
Drew just thought about it.
Number one,
Drew
three straight number 1 picks. 3 straight number 1.
He's Heisman
Trophy winner. Kyler, Jalen wasn't number 1.
No,
but you're going to have Caleb Williams probably go number 1 this year.
Yeah,
Baker shouldn't have gone number 1. I'll say that now. He shouldn't have gone.
That's a Cleveland problem.
Yeah,
that's not Lincoln Riley.
That's a Jimmy Haslam problem.
Professional player development problem, not a collegiate player development problem. He balled out in college.
But you're not wrong, Corey. And I think, but I mean, I think that like some kids are still going to want to go to the colleges where they can get developed, especially, the ones who do want to put that work in and who do want to be, refined going into
all those teams are going to come calling anyway.
Yeah, I mean, and they're going to come calling anyway. So
if I'm a 5-star from Maryland and Florida comes calling, or I'm a 5-star from Maryland and USC comes calling, it's going to come down to money.
That, or who's going to develop you more.
And the thing would be,
position.
If I'm a 5-star from Maryland and I go to Oregon, then hey, mom and dad, I get to come home and play in front of you every other year. Like I think these West Coast teams will grab just a few more East Coast guys, because the East Coast guys will be like, all right, well, my family still gets to come see me play when I play in Indiana and Purdue and Ohio and Michigan. All these places are drivable.
And but I can also see that out in California too, like poaching LA kids for these East Coast teams. Like, hey, I'll still be able to see you.
It's rare. It's rare.
Oh, well,
especially with Lincoln Riley. Yeah, you're going to have a few guys, but I mean, the USC playing in the Big Ten is a game changer. That's a complete game changer for the Pac-12. To me, for California kids. I mean, California kids don't ever want to pretty much leave California. Typically, I mean, and why would you? I mean, let's be honest.
It's a culture thing. It's a California culture thing too.
So if yeah,
it's just a culture thing.
I'm with you. Because I mean, but look at the Pac-12 recruiting. I mean, what states did they have to recruit from? And granted, you still get the big states, but they're mainly just recruiting California. You're still getting the kids that trickle in from Texas, Florida, Ohio, Michigan, but
Arizona's
not
big.
like you're going to have now.
Arizona's a big. The Phoenix areas are
Arizona's
big.
big. Colorado's on the come up.
Colorado
But-
That's
football,
okay.
yeah.
But
That's
like
okay.
all those
Colorado
Big
only
12
recruits
schools are there
transfers.
too.
No,
I
with
wanna
high
know
school
what-
football, like Colorado high school football is on its
I
way
know.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
But-
and you're still going to get your Ohio kids that are still going to go to Ohio State.
Oh,
You're
no,
not gonna,
you're gonna get
not
your
every
Michigan-
Ohio kid. Yeah,
Yeah,
not
no.
every kid is going to go there. But if 1 4 or 5 star goes there, that's one less guy that shouldn't have gone there. You know what I'm saying? That's a guy.
100%.
Ryan Day is going to have to work harder, not just at preventing Michigan from taking Ohio kids. They're going to
Yeah.
have to work on getting USC to not take Ohio kids. Because if you've lived in Ohio your entire life and a guy comes calling from California and says, well, we have sunshine 317 days of the 365 days a year. When you're born and bred in Ohio, that's a complete different thing.
Yeah, but I also think too, like, it's the travel for those kids too. Like, we've seen even like Florida kids come up here up north to like our programs, and they like within a year they just get so homesick that they transfer back.
Well, and that's a whole nother
Yeah.
story. That's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
You could lose a recruiting battle, but then a year later win the recruiting battle because you're bringing him home. So I mean, like that's a plus in for the East opposed to for kids going to the West. But I mean, realistically, with USC, Washington, Oregon, UCLA, them playing like Drew said on the East Coast,
To be
3,
honest,
4, 5 games, they're going to be home half the year.
dude, to be honest, you know what I see this all heading with all the money that's going to be flooded into like these conferences with all these teams. These teams are just going to become miniature like professional franchises, and each team's going to have their own plane. And they're going to be like, "Oh, you're a California kid. You want your parents to come out here and watch this game? Cool, we'll send the plane out to pick a bunch of people up."
Depends who that player is.
Depends on who it is, but like,
if you're a first stringer, probably.
yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like,
if you're
but
a
like,
scrub,
why wouldn't
go
you
fuck
do
yourself.
it? Oh, 1000%.
Yeah, it's going towards semi-pro. This is no longer amateur
football.
sports.
No.
This is no longer amateur sports.
Well, and rivalries. I mean, I don't want to say they don't matter because you're still going to have your big rivalries, but like it doesn't mean as much. I mean, if Michigan and Ohio State are both undefeated, if Michigan and Ohio State are both undefeated, let's say next year, they're playing each other twice in 2 weeks.
Not only that, like if you're both
Mhm.
undefeated, like even if you both have one loss going into that game, you got to assume a 2-loss Ohio State, 2-loss Michigan team are gonna make the Big Ten or make the college football playoff with 12 teams.
It depends on who your losses are to.
Yeah, but it depends. But like, I mean, it also.
And
I'm just saying,
everyone else.
like, yeah, it depends on a lot of different things. There's so many variables, but I'm just saying, like, I would imagine a 2-loss Ohio State, 2-loss Michigan team are within the top 12 of the country. You would just imagine
Generally.
You
generally
like
speaking.
think.
Yeah, generally speaking. I mean, I could say
you'd
the
like
same
to
thing.
think like we talked about.
Like even like a 2-loss UCLA, 2-loss USC, 2-loss Oregon. They're probably in the top 12.
So, how far are we from full conference disbandment and going towards one lump free for all?
Honestly,
Just like you were leaning
I think
towards
you're
that.
I think you're closer to that than you are.
I think by
the alternative.
I think by 2030, you're gonna have college football as an NFL style system, where you have 2 conferences and you go play for a national title, and it's gonna be set up just like the NFL.
So,
and they're gonna separate
North
P5,
South.
G5.
Yep. Well, no,
G5
there's not going to be a P5 or whatever. It's just going to be
whatever P2.
Yep. It's just going
The
to
top
be
60-ish teams.
Oh, you're going to
64.
Not. I don't even think that.
Depends,
Honestly,
they might cut.
Yeah. Honestly, I think you're going to be looking. You're going to be looking at the Big Ten versus SEC, and those are going to be your 2 conferences, like the NFC, AFC. And they're going to be split up into divisions. They're going to be split up. Watch it happen. I think by 2030, it's going to happen.
To be honest, it really lies on the ACC. The ACC needs to come up with a
100%.
plan to keep together, because if the ACC disbands and half the teams go to the Big Ten and half the teams go to the SEC,
You have no choice.
You're left with the Big 12,
Who has nobody.
which doesn't have Texas or Oklahoma. So you're looking at like
TCU.
Cincinnati, Colorado,
TCU,
TCU,
Kansas
those
State,
teams
Kansas State,
to run.
Utah,
Which again,
Utah.
take nothing away from them. They're good, but you're not going to have anywhere near the competition of what the SEC and the Big Ten are going to provide. I don't personally think it's going to get that far. I think at some point the NCAA is going to have to step in and do something. And I don't know if they can, but it doesn't. I just don't see. To me, the best thing about college football is that you have the rivalries in the Big Ten. You have games that shouldn't matter when you typically look at it. Games that shouldn't matter end up mattering because of the conference prestige. I don't know that it'll get that far, but you're trending more towards that than you are the alternative. I just hope it doesn't get that far, because to be honest, I don't want to see 6 SEC teams versus 6 Big Ten teams for a national title.
Well, I mean, what if they're not called that anymore? Is it just always going to be that deep down?
I mean, let's be honest,
The
though.
brand is
If you
too
have to
big.
look at if you take conferences out of it, my top 12, Nick's top 12, your top 12, probably 10 of the 12 teams are going to match,
But I'm saying,
regardless
are you
of
still going to
conference.
right? So it wouldn't matter SEC, Big Ten,
No, you're
Pod
talking.
1, Pod 2.
Yeah.
It's just going to be the same sum of teams. Yeah.
I just think conferences make too much money, and they're not going to go that route. They're going to find a way to.
No,
Keep
but
it
that's
that
what they're
way.
going to do. They're just going to keep swallowing up the teams that they want, and then you're going to have whoever's not chosen by the Big Ten or SEC are going to fall to the group of 5 stages, and they're going to have their own playoff system and their own basically new Power 5 conferences, and you're going to be left with 2 super conferences who play a
What if you
little
take a
NFL
super
style schedule.
conference? Say you take a super conference of 48 teams and relegate everybody else to FCS. The recruiting's basically cut off at that point, as it is, if you cut the cap, because everybody's going to want to be in the play for the national title. So everybody else just be in the FCS.
I mean, honestly,
FCS ratings skyrocket.
And I hate to say this, but I could really see, like, remember a few, like, it was like maybe 6 or 7 years ago now, where that one oil tycoon from the Middle East wanted to start the like Super League out in Europe with all the top
European Super League.
Yeah, with all the top teams. I could see something like
Real
that.
Madrid,
Real,
Bayern, Man United,
Liverpool,
Juventus.
Man City, Juventus, yeah, Barcelona, like all of them, right? He just wanted to get those guys together and just play a league. I think
the Super Champions League or whatever it was called.
I think you could potentially see that in college football too, where you just have Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Florida State, Clemson, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, USC, UCLA, Oregon, Oklahoma, Texas, pretty much all leave and just join one thing and say, this is a real national championship, what we do in our league.
I also think it's going to be based on the smaller teams, because you know what you're going to basically get from the bigger teams. So now I think over the next like 4, 5, 6 years, it's based on what, Washington, Indiana, Purdue, Auburn, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, whatever, who those teams that you would even in like the Big 12, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, those teams, like, they haven't been great, but they have years where they were good and could potentially play for a national title. And that would essentially open up saying, hey, the Big 12 is worthy of getting more teams and is worthy of being a super conference. So, I mean, I think it's the smaller schools that are going to make the difference because you know what you're going to get from Ohio State, Michigan, USC, Oklahoma. Even though Oklahoma is down, they're still getting recruits. They're still going to be decent. They're not going to ever be like 1-11. So I mean,
they were close last year.
New coaching regime. Every team goes through a new coaching regime where they have ups and downs. So I mean, he had to basically overhaul everything. You lost your star quarterback. You lost your star wide receivers. He had to start over, and he was hired after the first recruiting cycle. So it's a tough thing. I mean, not everybody can just be, oh, hey, I'm the best cornerback ever. Why don't you come play for me and get 50-something transfers to come to Colorado? It's not going to be just that easy, for everybody. So, I mean,
Drew,
it's an interesting thing.
Drew, what do you think? What do you think the future of college football is going to be? The way things are trending.
Well, I think we do just get bigger. I think the conferences get bigger. I wouldn't mind G5 breaking off and doing their own playoff.
I think it's time.
But I'm going to really look forward to seeing like the smaller schools, like how they deal with this, like Corey was talking about, like what's Indiana and Northwestern look like in 3-4 years? Have they had a winning season? Like, I feel like the cellar dwellers are going to just get buried even more. And the conference is getting better. It's no doubt about that.
I think
it's
just
not getting better for everyone.
Yep.
It's not getting better for Indiana and Northwestern.
Purdue,
maybe they're making a little more money. Maybe they can spend money and upgrade facilities. And of course they can, but are they going to be able to draw in the players that can help them defeat teams that are USC, that are
light years ahead at this point?
They might have 1 or 2 3-stars on the roster. You know what I'm saying? The Big Ten, these schools, we're going to need a lot more Minnesotas, a lot more PJ Flex, who just grab those 3-star and just develop them, and that's how you build your programs.
And build a program.
So we're going to need better
coaching.
Guys.
Yeah. Ethan?
But, I mean, are there going to be the coaches out there for the picking? Are we going to see this whole new regime of coaches come across? Are we going to pick up another dozen coordinators that are coach able, or are they just going to be coordinators that get defaulted to irrelevancy?
Well, here's a question for you. Are you going to see more coordinators stay where they're at? So, like, Ohio State, Michigan, are you going to see less movement in the coaching staffs, knowing, okay, I could go, like, Jeff Hafley wanted to be a head coach, right? The old DC at Ohio State. Just using this example because it's a guy I know and I could reference it, okay? So he left after the 2019 season to be the head coach at Boston College. Let's fast forward now 5 years. If he was a DC at Ohio State, last year, let's say the 2019 season was the 22 season, he's going into 23 looking at these super conferences being set up. Does he go, maybe I shouldn't leave and become a head coach and stay here? And when I do and if I do these great things here at Ohio State over a long period, if Lincoln Riley goes to the NFL, or if Ryan Day goes to the NFL, or if Jim Harbaugh goes to the NFL, or if, Nick Saban retires, Kirby Smart moves on, or whatever happens, I can get one of those jobs instead of taking this little rinky-dink position, right?
I don't think so. I think they always. I'm
just saying that's like Boston College. They always
say you jump ship when the iron's hot. I mean, like you've got. I mean, for instance, Sharon Moore, Michigan's offensive coordinator, came out and said, "Do I want to be a head coach someday? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
But I also love Ann Arbor and I love Coach Harbaugh. So it's one of those things where it has to be the perfect job. Now, with all these teams coming to the Big Ten, that potentially opens up a better job for somebody else when they don't succeed. Not to use them. I think Washington is a great team. But I think after this year, is it Peterson? Is he still the head coach at Washington?
No, he
Kalen
left.
DeBoer.
Oh, DeBoer. Okay,
Peterson's
so
gone.
yeah, so I mean, it's
Well, what
you
I'm
know, I
saying
think
though
you're
is
gonna
just
have.
like in the NFL, you saw McDaniel stay by Belichick's side for a long time. You see coordinators stay for a very long
The
time.
enemy.
Yeah, Bieniemy. You see these guys stay
He's in
because
Washington now.
yeah, but like you
Mhm.
see them stay like because
He
like
turned down a
holy
lot of
crap.
jobs.
Yeah, so did McDaniels and like because you're winning and you're like so like
And you
that's
got
what I'm
Patrick
saying.
Mahomes.
Yeah,
It
like
has to be the perfect fit. You might see coordinators think whatever, but I mean, again, we're in
I'm
the
just
day of
saying
college
I was
football where
just
if you don't produce with the talent that you have, your job is in jeopardy. If you don't do what you're
right.
supposed to, regardless if you're in year 1 or year 10, unless you're at Iowa, who supposedly is allowed to be terrible on offense and keep your job. I mean, outside of that, I mean, if I mean, let's be honest. Let's play devil's advocate. If Ohio State has let's say a 3-loss season this year and your defense doesn't produce, are you keeping the DC?
Well,
Probably not.
probably not. But what I'm saying,
But I'm
well,
saying,
right,
but I mean,
you're not wrong. There's variables into it, obviously. Like coaches could get fired for whatever reason. I'm just posing that thing. Do you like Drew and
You're
Ethan?
saying
Do you feel there would be less
if
movement?
yeah. I think it's completely different person to person. Like different people have different priorities. What's your priority? Is it money? Because then you might be moving a lot more than you're not. But if it's like culture and other stuff, I think
what it
it's
also,
just different person to person,
yeah, it has
different
to be
coach
the
to coach.
right job for everybody. Like, for instance,
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think Kirby Smart is successful at every place he would be a head coach at. Georgia gave him the keys, let him run it the way that he wants to. Not every school is going to give him the keys like that. So it depends on the situation. I also think it depends on like if you're ready. Like I think Lanning, is it Lanning, Dan Lanning, Oregon's coach? I think he's a
Mhm.
phenomenal coach and I think he'll be a great head coach. I think he was not necessarily ready to be a head coach. And he took money knowing that, okay, if I want to be a head coach, this is my opportunity. If I don't take it, I may never get another shot. And that's the case with a lot of people. And you see it work out sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't work out. I mean, let's be honest. Texas might be looking for a new head coach
I
if
guess,
Texas is
I
not good
guess,
this year.
I guess more or less, my question, Ethan, would be: would you risk going to another program when like you're at like an Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State where you're or Michigan where you're competing for a national championship every single year? You know what I mean? And now like the conferences have obviously gotten better, but like I guess my point is like would you want to leave one of those top end programs for a potential rebuilding job where you may never sniff the playoffs again because the talent discrepancy is already light years ahead in today's age.
I think that, in a sense, the best example of that's going to be Luke Fickell and what he's able to produce at Wisconsin. Because at that point, he's either going to have the option of a lateral move with potential, or he's going to have to go to a top 15 team. Not disrespecting Wisconsin and their ability to recruit and talent, but Wisconsin now falls into a different tier of Big Ten talent with the acquisition of these 4 teams from the West. So not only does Wisconsin not have the ability to run the West, they don't have the ability to just play Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and Indianapolis every year, most years. Fickles basically took himself unknowingly into an uphill battle, and he I mean, I don't know. I think when he took the job at Wisconsin, he wasn't expecting this to happen. He thought he
No.
was going to be able to be a powerhouse in the Big Ten West, and
And
he was
that's
going to be able to build it how he wanted, and he was going to be able to build it how he wanted because he's a capable coach. But now that's all thwarted. I mean, where does he go from there? Does he default to being a coordinator again just for the opportunity
Go back to Ohio
earn a
State and
coaching job?
go back to Ohio State and just be a
wherever.
coordinator or wherever he decides to go. Yeah. I mean, I feel like if he's going to stop being a head coach, he would go back to Columbus. That's just my opinion with
But
Fickle.
he's got the talent to do what he's going to do. But
Yeah.
where's he going to go do it at? Is he's going to have to default back and take a demotion to get the promotion in the long run? Like some of these guys are probably going to have to go that way.
I don't disagree.
I think demotion sounds bad, like bad connotation, but like for instance, me when I'm playing NCAA 14 and I just had a great year, I'm gonna go to a shit school because I'm like a builder. I want to recruit. I want to build like a shitty team
Make
make
him a
them good.
power. Yeah.
So like there's coaches like that, I'm sure. Don't know, I can't name any, but it's just
Football
different
games
person
coming
to
back next
person.
year.
I got him. I got one for you. His name's Ted Lasso.
You're right. You have builders, you've got prodigies, you've got
do.
coaching tree kids, you've got silver spoon guys, you've got
Some
there's
people are
multiple
just in it for the
different
money.
levels. Yeah, there's money grab guys. There's guys that are just going to go get their bag and go home, and they're going to destroy an entire team. And
Speaking
we'll have
of
to watch out for that.
Speaking of a guy I don't
Mhm.
think expected anything when he took a job was I don't think Matt Rule expected what was going to happen when he took the Nebraska job. Because like imagine
With the teams coming in.
yeah, like with adding these 4 teams, like now he's even like you want to talk about being moved down a tier in a conference, adding 4 teams. I mean, he's moved down quite a
True.
bit.
I heard that
we haven't seen their team play, so it's kind of all assumption. Who knows? They could come out and win 10 games this year and surprise everybody. So I mean, it's an unknown for him.
Yeah,
but I mean, you're not wrong if it's Nebraska of old. You know, they're getting pushed down a few more pegs starting next year.
You're not wrong, but I'm just saying, like, I'm just looking at where these teams were at, like, in these past few years, and you can clearly see there is a talent gap between the top end of the Big Ten, like, between, like, the top 3 teams, and literally everybody else.
I've got another name for you.
Yeah.
Brent Venables.
Brent Venables.
I don't think he had any idea that he was going to end up
back in the SEC or into the SEC. Yeah,
moving.
I don't
to the
think
SEC.
Oklahoma thought they were going to have to find a head coach.
I'm not going to argue with that one either.
Lincoln Riley decided I didn't want. I mean, I will say this. I don't know that Lincoln Riley saw them going to the Big Ten. I think Lincoln Riley thought, oh, I can go dominate the Pac-12 and make a bowl game. That's why he jumped ship to me. I think it also helps that USC gave him 3 times the amount of his home in Oklahoma, and also gave him access to a private jet.
I think
all that helps. But
I think Lincoln Riley
ruling the
Pac-12, yeah,
not the Big Ten,
and making the playoff every year.
He was going to make USC relevant again, but not the way that it's going to end up going down.
No,
I believe in Lincoln Riley's heart. He knows that he cannot play good enough defense to defeat Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, Washington, all these teams on the same schedule.
Year over year. Yeah, because he had to worry about was Oregon and Utah.
Yeah.
Outside of a couple of hiccups.
Yeah.
So I agree 100%.
I will say, unlike y'all, I don't think Brent Venables is a terrible head coach. I think Oklahoma
a better coordinator.
Was shitty last year. They had a lot of injuries, a lot of shit, a lot of transfers. I'm just saying, give Brent Venables one more year, and when he wins 8 games this year, talk to me.
Well, I think if Oklahoma can play defense like Clemson, they'll be fine.
But he went from picking up a team he thought could be 10-2 every year, and now he's going to be lucky if he goes 8-4 until he gets his feet under him.
And that's, but like
it's also his alumni, though.
But
that's a major drive on why he chose that.
But I also think, 100%. But I also think when they join the SEC, they're never going to be picked to beat Alabama. They're never going to be picked to beat Georgia. So if he does beat them, that's a win that nobody saw coming. It's like Tennessee. Nobody thought Alabama would lose to Tennessee. Nobody thought Georgia. Everyone thought Georgia would steamroll Tennessee.
Never thought.
I mean, like it just
goalpost being torn down out of a stadium and carried into a river.
Hey,
that was awesome.
Hey, when you win, you gotta party it up. When you win games like that, because how many times has Tennessee beaten Alabama in the last 20 years?
Not many. Once,
so I mean,
twice.
do what you got to do.
Do you think that if Harbaugh makes the jump back up, I'll just throw a whole curveball out there. Does Michigan reach out to Les Miles?
No.
So
I don't think Les Miles is done.
Keep up with
First of all, let's be honest. Les Miles took the job when he was the right person for the job, and he took the job, signed the contract, and then got out of it. So, I mean, to be honest, I mean, it's one of those things. Nick, you and I have this conversation a lot. Who do you get that's better? I think at this point, there's only one name. I've said it for a long time. He left Indiana to come back home. I think Mike Hart is the next coach. Personally, that's just me. I know Sharon more and everything like that, but at the end of the day, Michigan has had coaches that aren't Michigan men, and it makes a huge difference.
I love the idea of Mike Hart coaching Michigan, but that's just me.
The thing is can he be a head coach though?
Well, here's the thing. Well, it depends. It depends on when he takes. It depends on when he would take the job over. If he's set up with young guys, with a returning quarterback, for instance, how Ryan Day took over Ohio State. Ryan Day took over Ohio State with a crap ton of talent, and all he had to do was just continue to do his job, which was coaching the offense. I mean, Mike Hart, you could potentially say is the best running back coach.
You're not wrong,
in all of college football.
You're not wrong. He
developed Indiana running backs to be NFL players.
You're not wrong, but in coaching and when you're doing things, there is a huge gap between getting running backs ready and doing what Ryan Day was doing at Ohio State when he wasn't a head coach, but he was the passing game coordinator and quarterbacks coach. So he basically set up the entire passing game for the offense. So there was like a little less of a learning curve Ryan Day really had to go through. And he got early experience, obviously, when he was the interim head coach for those 3 games or whatever when Urban was suspended.
When you might have the same situation
next year for Michigan. But what I'm saying, though, is there was a lot less of a learning curve that Ryan Day had to go through than Mike Hart will have to go to being a running backs coach, then to running and putting together an offense.
A higher jump.
It's a way higher jump. And I said if Harbaugh leaves, I do say Mike Hart would be the next head coach, but I worry that it would be too big of a gap for him to jump right at that moment instead of him like this year making a jump from running back coach to like offensive coordinator or assistant OC.
Well, and that's what it's going to be. I don't think it's again all hypothetical. If Harbaugh leaves next year, you kind of get forced into a position that you don't necessarily want to be. If Harbaugh stays, let's say 2 more years, I could totally see Sharon Moore leaving to take a head coaching job because he's definitely due. He might be a smaller school, but he could easily get a Power 5 coaching job, probably, no doubt. And then Hart would be promoted to offensive coordinator. I'm pretty sure Mike Hart is already the associate head coach. I'm pretty sure that's how Harbaugh was able to get him to come to Michigan, because I think he was the associate head coach at Indiana too.
I mean, you could be an associate head coach, running backs coach. But you're still just only involved in those words. I'm just saying some of those titles are just titles.
But you, Nick, you and I have this conversation a lot. There's a big difference between a coach that actually played football at the school
Well, right.
compared to someone who did not. So
You're not wrong.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, looking at names up and down, there's a number of guys that I could look at and say, I think he would be a good fit at Michigan. But at the same time, I'm weary to go away from a guy who played at Michigan because we haven't had good success with guys who have not played at Michigan. I mean, even
Who
Brady
would you
Hoke
go with,
came
Ethan?
in.
What, to Michigan?
Yeah.
I have no idea. I mean, I would assume you'd have to promote from within unless you had a surefire.
I mean, if you weren't going to
had to
go
have
with,
a
like,
guy.
Mike Hart, like, if you weren't going to go Mike Hart, who would you go with?
Tom Brady.
I don't see him being a guy that's coaching. I mean,
No. He got paid $100 million to be an analyst for 16 games a year. So I'm sure he's not going to be a head coach.
I don't know. I mean, if you're talking something crazy, I could see Charles Woodson going and doing it.
Nick, you and I talked about it. We talked about
Could he
what's
coach,
his
though?
face?
Can he
What's it
coach?
called? Desmond Howard.
Desmond
Howard's been around the game for so long. He knows college football. I mean, he could recruit the hell out of the state of Michigan and the state of Ohio.
But the thing
And
is,
I mean, I wouldn't past him to.
But the thing is, can they coach? It's different.
There's a lot of guys that get paid to coach that can't coach.
You're not wrong, but I'm just saying, like there's a reason some people didn't get into coaching and they went into broadcasting. You know what I mean?
Well,
that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying in that aspect. And that Kirk Herbstreit's another thing. Why isn't he coaching? Well, he went into broadcasting for a reason.
Well, hypothetically, Nick, if Ryan Day leaves Ohio State, let's say chooses to leave on his own, and Luke Fickell says, no, I want to stay at Wisconsin, who's your choice?
Brian Hartline.
He doesn't have any coaching experience.
Can he
coach? Can he coach?
Can he coach, though?
Clearly, he's developed wide receiver after wide receiver into the first
Mike
round.
Hart
at the positional
after running back.
Coaching.
Yeah,
that's
but
positional. You just
but what I'm saying,
argument.
no, but what I'm saying, but like
at least general manager.
But what I'm saying though is like if Mike Hart was a coordinator this year, going into next year, he would have more experience on how to run a team. So you're not wrong. Hartline doesn't have that now, but you're saying next year. Well, if next year Ryan Day leaves, or in 2 years Ryan Day leaves, and Luke Fickell doesn't want the job, you give it to Hartline because at least he's a coordinator.
He knows how to run the offense.
Right.
Okay, Mike Hart can run the offense, hand the ball off every play. Worked this year. It's going to work this year. Worked last year. Worked the year before.
Concept.
I mean, it's the same concept. I think. I mean, you could,
but it's way different. It's different.
I don't think
making
so.
a position
I don't think
coach.
So. We don't know if Brian Hartline can coach offense.
Yeah, we don't know if he's an OC.
You don't know if he can coach offense, and you don't know how
saying,
much Brian Hartline is actually calling
I'm
the
not
plays
saying
compared to what Ryan Day is.
You're not wrong, but
he will have more experience.
That's all I'm saying.
A year of elevated experience.
There's a huge gap between being a position coach and being a coordinator. There's a huge gap. No matter what position you're in, what position room you're in, whatever, there is a huge gap between being a running back coach and an offensive coordinator, a wide receiver coach, offensive coordinator. There's a huge gap between those two responsibilities. You're asking me at the end of 2024, who would, if you don't get Luke Fickell, I would say Brian Hartline, because at least he has the experience regardless of how the season goes. You see how it goes. But then you go, well, Brian Hartline does have that experience of at least in that type of a role and not just a position coach. Because setting up an entire...
we could be wrong. I don't think Mike Hart would be my choice just because he's a Michigan man.
1,000%.
I mean, you've got Sharon Moore could be the head coach. You've also got Jesse Minter could be the head coach.
I was just saying that, like, my only worry...
Nice. Minter would be a great pick.
1,000%.
I mean, Minter is a good coach. I mean,
so here's another curveball. What if something really wild happens and Chip Kelly gets kicked out at UCLA? Does someone jump ship?
No, I don't see anybody
That's
jumping
an
ship
attractive job.
I don't
Does
think
a
it
James
is.
Franklin? Does a Luke
That's an
Fickle?
attractive job,
Does
bro.
You know what I could see happening?
somebody jump to that?
You know what I could see happening is I could see with the talent level that like Penn State has, if like let's say at the end of this year, Chip Kelly decides he wants to leave UCLA, I could see, and he's like voiced that throughout the year. I could see Penn State picking up the phone and being like, "We got a fuck ton of talent here. Come coach us, please." Because James Franklin clearly has shown that he cannot
I don't think
win
Chip
big
Kelly's
games.
a good coach. I don't
I
think
think
Chip
Chip
Kelly
Kelly
can
is a
keep
good
a team.
coach.
I
I
don't
think
think he
Kelly's
can
good
keep a
coach in
team.
the Pac-12.
He's a good offensive-minded guy.
Yeah, he's an offensive-minded guy, but I don't think he's a long-term answer to anybody.
I think
I
he'd be
think you could
phenomenal
see-
in the Mountain West.
I think you would see.
1000%.
He'd be
I think you
phenomenal.
would see. He'd be really good at
At
West
Boise,
Virginia.
fuck, bro.
But I
I
can
think
see
you might see.
WV,
I could.
that'd be awesome.
That'd
I
be
don't think you'll
dope.
see a head coach jump ship. I could easily see an offensive coordinator, a defensive coordinator jumping ship real fast, though, if that job opened up.
One of
So,
the
like,
high-level G5 coaches, I think, would be
I think you would look to one of
would
them
want
first.
would want to go up. Yeah, I mean, I
Or
think that UCLA job is
and
it just got better, obviously,
and
Yeah,
at
that's
the
way
end
more
of
and it's
this,
attractive.
already a very attractive job.
well, and two, I think a lot of that would depend too on where teams finish this year. Because, like, just for instance, you're a
Mhm.
2-loss TCU team, right? You're ranked 13th in the country. Just keep this in mind. You're ranked 13th. You're
No
10
way
and
2 loss
2.
TCU ends up 13th.
But just keeps it. You have
No
a
chance.
bunch. But I'm just saying.
They'll be lucky to be in the
Bet the
top
under.
25.
But think about if they are ranked 13th and above them, you have like USC, Oregon, Washington. Maybe not UCLA, but then you have like Texas above them. You have LSU above them. You have maybe another SEC surprise SEC team above them, or like a Wisconsin above them. You start looking, if you're that head coach, we
I don't
didn't
think
make
so.
it now. What happens when all these teams join together and now their strength of schedules are way better than ours? Are they going to be higher ranked even if they have 2 losses if we are 1-loss team and we
I'm
lose?
telling you right now.
I'm
Depends
just
If
how
the
saying.
TCU
insecure
head
you are.
coach goes to UCLA, UCLA is not going to be good in the Big Ten. We've
Sonny
already seen
Dykes.
Big 12 coaches.
He
We've already
beat
seen Big 12
Michigan.
coaches.
He's equivalent to Chip Kelly.
I don't
Yeah,
think
I don't-
He's in
so.
the same
He beat
room.
he beat
He plays
Michigan with
defense.
a bunch of guys that are third and fourth year guys that went pro. He had a lot of talent. It was a group of guys
We're
that
They were
not
stayed
wrong.
hot.
together
They were
and
hot.
played.
They
And
were
they got
hot,
and
man.
they
They
got
were
hot at
rolling.
they got hot at the right time.
Yeah.
Again, you also I mean there's a lot of factors in that too. Michigan did themselves no favors in that game.
But I
Michigan
think
did themselves no
TCU
favors. But
plays defense more than any Pac-12 or Big 12 team does.
I mean,
What?
you'll have to see. I
Any
don't
Big
think
12
so.
team?
Better than Baylor?
Baylor's good.
Oh,
I think
bro.
don't
Better
sleep on
defense?
Cincinnati's
than
defense
Baylor?
either. Don't sleep on Cincinnati's
Kansas
defense this year
State,
either.
Texas Tech,
Yeah, there's a lot of good teams.
Oklahoma
Tech's a
State,
sleeper to win the Big 12 as it is.
BYU.
Nobody plays defense like pretty much west of Nebraska.
Does Nebraska play defense?
No.
Judge.
Oh,
They have
I-
defenses,
yeah,
but do they play defense? Like,
Utah.
Baylor.
I'll put Utah's
Utah.
defense against any defense in the country.
Yeah,
For
I'm
real.
a sucker for a Baylor
For real.
defense. This thing's built.
against Georgia's
I love
defense?
Baylor too.
Against
Yes,
Georgia?
yes, I will. You know about the Utes?
Yeah.
Oh,
And I
boy.
don't-
I bet that.
And I don't
I
think
bet
that
if you
defense.
put Utah versus Georgia, it'd look a lot like that Clemson Georgia game to start the season a few years ago. 13-10, somewhere in that ballpark.
I think if you
Yeah.
put Utah versus
I would take Georgia.
I think you're looking
Easy.
at what was that Tennessee score against Georgia? Like 28 to
24-14.
24-14. I think
So
you're
a good
looking at
game.
like a 24-10 game or like a 35-10.
I mean, that's better than what Georgia beats most people by. They normally are up 28-0 at the end of the first quarter.
Yeah, didn't they hang 70 on Georgia Tech?
Yeah, I mean, I don't
R.I.P.
know.
Georgia Tech's program.
I don't think I think again the way college football is going to be, you're going to have a group of 10 teams that are going to be in the playoff every single year. And you may not be every single year, but you're going to, I mean, that's just the way college football is going. And those schools are going to make the most money, which means they're going to invest the most money to get the 5 stars. And it's just going to be a rotating schedule. All the rest of the teams are, it's going to be like playing in the, in the MAC for everybody else.
So going into next season with the 12 teams, would you prefer the first week bye and get like that first round bye and get maybe 2 to 3 weeks off? Or would you prefer to play that first home game?
Play the first home game? Bye. I don't.
You want that?
How many times?
You want that?
How many times have you
watched merch money? That's going to be a
well.
Big
But
paycheck.
How many times have you watched a team come off a bye and come out flat in the first half?
How hurt am I going into that?
Why wouldn't you take a bye?
Into that? Yeah,
I mean,
I would take a bye all day.
I don't. Yeah. I see. I
Rest.
I think it depends. I mean, really. I mean, it could go both ways. Really,
how much
you could
do
be
if you
lost week 2 and you haven't lost since, and your team is rolling. Why would you want to? Why would you want to stop playing for 2 weeks, 3 weeks before you play, and then have to travel and get up and go again, opposed to staying at home, practicing, getting used to it, and playing that game? I mean, I think. It's going to depend. I mean, you're going to have teams that are going to have one loss in the SEC championship, Big Ten championship, who are going to still get a bye, and it'll be perfect for them because it'll be perfect for them. Oh, they lost their last game. They're motivated, things like that, and have all that too. But then you're going to have another team. You're going to have a team like TCU, who nobody thought should have been there, was playing their best football as it was, and they played their best game because it was recent.
But that's also a thing going into the 12 team. If you keep playing, then you're going to have to run a buzzsaw gauntlet of Utah, Penn State, Alabama. You're going to have to go bang, bang, bang. Versus,
I mean, but if you have a bye, you're going to have a tough game your first game anyway.
Or
without a bye, you're playing 15, 16 games a year.
I agree.
One thing
I'm excited. Hopefully, we eventually get to see. If they ever decide to do it, is I hope you get like Alabama and Georgia one year, who are like six ranked, and you have like Michigan or Ohio State or Penn State, who are like the 5 team, and Alabama and Georgia have to come up here in like December and play outside in the snow.
I'd be willing to say right now that Alabama and Georgia are probably going to have buys.
No, I'm just saying, in the years that they have, 2 losses, though, they're not going to have a bye. Unless they probably win the SEC.
They'll still probably be the higher seed.
But, also, if you look back to 2 years ago, Ohio State couldn't play in the snow in Michigan, so I feel like that's a moot point.
I mean...
I don't think
we play
top-tier programs are going to have... It's not going to affect them too much.
Do you think eventually you may see... northern teams with the new playoff system because of hosting playoff games? Could you see most of them maybe building new stadiums with domes?
Yes,
100%. Roof stadiums, something
outside of stadiums that already hold enough people. I don't think Michigan and Ohio State are going to do anything about it, but
there would probably be a riot if both those teams tried to build.
Well, no, if you put a dome on either one of those things, you're taking out 20, 30,000 seats.
Unless they figure out a way it could be constructed on the stadium as it stands. You know what I mean?
No. Sounds like money.
Well, to be fair, I would love to see USC come play Michigan in December. Please bring that on
that. Everybody's on that. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal.
Yeah,
I think. Go ahead, Drew.
I think we're trying to stretch it to make it a deal.
Yeah, everybody's trying to find that next story.
Well,
it will affect certain players, and
it's gonna.
There's just so many variables.
But I guess my thing though is okay, when there's literally snow on the field and stuff, it changes your play calling. It changes how your players play. we've been outside.
Yeah.
We live
Mhm.
in the cold for 6 months out of the year, right? When we go outside, even when it's 20 degrees out, when you breathe that in December, that air is
You don't think
cold
all
and it
this new
chills.
money that UCLA and
Dog,
USC and Oregon are
dog,
getting, they're not
dog,
going to invest
listen,
in something to?
listen. I ran cross country when I was running cross country in high school in October, November, and region or like in our districts, and it was 50 degrees outside. Even 50-degree air, when you are running and it's going into your lungs, it ices your lungs. Your
A
But I'm
lungs do
sure
hundred
not.
percent.
No,
they're
listen,
going to find a way to
but like
condition these kids.
well,
It's
it
going to
doesn't.
happen
But
faster than
you
you think.
But you're
you
acting
can't
like they haven't
condition for
practiced
that.
in it for
But
4 months. They
no,
practice every day in the cold.
but
It's
they
not like
but they
they
don't.
shouldn't
They
be
go
used
into
to it.
But they don't, dude. Ohio State and Michigan, these players in December and November, or like during bowl practices or October, they're in the Woody. They're in your guys' indoor facilities that are climate
Two
controlled.
years ago, it was snowing and Michigan
Mhm.
practiced outside. Yeah, they have
Yeah,
those
you
facilities, but you
you
still practice
you
outside.
to acclimate yourself going into the games, but you can't there's no amount of conditioning that you can do for breathing
It
in cold air
also
while you're
it
running.
also
I'm
depends
telling you
on the
that
type
now.
of players. Yeah, you're right, but at the same time, if
Depends on
you
the
have an
person.
Ohio kid playing in the snow, they grew up playing in the snow. They're used to that. When you have a California kid going to playing in 2 inches of
Right.
snow who never saw snow until 3 years ago, that's a complete different thing. And
That's
you can't blame anyone
Yeah.
but your head coach for that if he's not ready to play in the snow. I
but
mean, that's not his fault.
no,
He grew up in California. And
but
again,
that's what
that's
I'm
all the more
saying. You
reason for
can't.
kids to go and stay in California to play.
Well,
That's
right,
on
but
them.
when you have
I
to
think
come
you
over
might see
here,
smaller schools. I think you might see smaller schools develop domes, to maybe, they're looking for a new stadium, just build a new one with a dome because it makes sense. Sure, I could see that. But I mean, if you build a dome for Penn State or build a dome for Michigan or build a dome for Ohio State, you're taking away all of the whole home field advantage to me. It snows.
Yeah.
That's a part of weather. That happens. That sucks.
but
That's
I
like
do.
playing in the rain. It's the same thing. You
I'm
don't prepare. You can't always
I'm
prepare
saying
for
though
that.
it will make a difference. So when USC has to come, if they have to come out here on a cold October night, if
Well, then they better be coming out off a bye, and so they can be out here for a week to practice in it. We can't help. You can't
dog,
if you're
what
the
are
Big
you?
Ten.
What are you? I'm
You
just
can't look
I'm
at it.
literally just saying that it's like it's going to matter, and you're not going to look at it. You're just going to say like you have to come out here and play the game because it's like it is when the schedule gets posted. But
I still don't think that'll happen though. I want it to, but you feel like the West Coast is going to get an advantage. And you feel like that USC, Oregon, UCLA is going to play their tough games at Ohio State, at Michigan early in the year, September, October. Yeah, there could be snow, but they're not. But the Big Ten's not going to risk USC coming to Columbus the second week of November. To me, I just don't see that happening. I think scheduling wise, they're going to take that into effect. Yeah, you might have Washington playing in Ann Arbor the second week of November. You might have that, but to me, that's not the same as having
I mean, I could see them.
USC.
USC came to like South Bend in what like late October.
So I'm 26. I'm already at 26 Ohio State
Mm.
kids on the roster that are from Louisiana, California, Florida, Texas, Oklahoma, Hawaii.
You're not wrong.
These kids are. It's all. It's going to be less of an issue than the media wants it to be. All these kids are
Well, and
seeing snow and playing in
I,
snow.
I don't think it's an issue anyway. When we were kids and it was snowing outside, we all wanted to go outside and play football in the snow. I mean, you can
Exactly.
say you can say what you want, but when we were kids in the snow, we were always outside in the snow playing, regardless of how cold it was. We wanted to be out there. So if you get guys from the East that want to be in the snow, that's what you get. I mean,
I do think it will. I think it will.
I still don't even think you can blame Stroud for their loss 2 years ago in the snow. Yeah, he didn't play his best game, sure. But I mean that he wasn't the sole reason why you guys lost. In the snow, you
Fair.
have to run the ball. If you can't run the ball in the snow, you're not going to be successful. That's it.
Well,
Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. Whether you
Fair.
live in California and play here, when USC, whoever comes to play here and it's snowing on the ground, their plan is going to be to run the ball. That's, I mean, I outside of, maybe a few NFL quarterbacks, you don't see a lot of colleges run and gun in the snow.
I don't know. I was
Be
just saying.
interesting to see.
I was just saying. I was just interesting to see it because you
I
rarely
hope.
see these teams.
I hope it does. I would love to see Oregon come play Ohio State in the snow. I just don't think the Big Ten is going to schedule it that way. I think they're going to schedule if the Big Ten was smart and regardless taking weather out of it, you're going to have your bigger games earlier in the year. So that loss, they can still potentially set themselves up for a title run. That's to
fair.
me, knowing that Michigan and Ohio State are going to play the last week of the season, knowing that you're going to have that, and that's going to be a big game that's going to affect it. I feel like you'd have USC, Ohio State in late September, UCLA, Michigan, late September, Oregon, Ohio State, late September. I mean, I think you're going to have more of that because even if Ohio State would lose in back-to-back weeks to USC and Oregon, they win out, they're still in the playoff. If you set that game up in November and Ohio State loses 2 November games and already lost a game in September, they're potentially the Big Ten is potentially screwing themselves out of it.
So they're going to make all the West Coast teams go to Minnesota and Wisconsin early too?
Right, you're gonna be no. That's how
there's
are
not
you?
enough weeks in the year.
Yeah, there's not enough weeks in the year.
I'm saying the Big Ten is going to protect the bigger brands of the sport.
It won't
by
matter.
that.
You're
eventually
gonna have to do it. You're eventually gonna have to bring some teams out. All I'm saying, my original point is I can't wait to see it because you can't you rarely see some of these teams play outside of their warm environment. Like you rarely see Alabama travel to a colder environment to play. You rarely see Georgia, USC, UCLA. Oregon, it gets colder up there, and same thing with Washington, just because of where they're located in the country, it gets a little colder up there. So I don't think it would necessarily make I don't think they'll necessarily have a transition period like USC or UCLA is when it's 70 degrees there, pretty much 70 plus there almost year round, right? So I was just saying, I just think it's going to be interesting seeing these teams come into these colder climates, hopefully, and play. I just think I think it'll be very
fun.
interesting, yeah. Especially if it's a playoff game. Could you imagine seeing Alabama or Georgia coming up here up north to play a playoff game in December and it's a snowstorm?
That's assuming that Alabama or Georgia is going to be a low seed.
I find all of that unlikely. It'll cycle around. It all cycles.
Yeah. Eventually it will happen. I'm just saying, that's going to be kind of cool to see, just because you don't get to see
the Big 12 and Pac-12 were
often.
National powerhouses, and now they barely exist. So
right. Well,
Wow.
I just think it's going to be cool to see that because, when do you get to see USC play October in a northern climate atmosphere? A northeast climate atmosphere? Never.
I know, because non-conference games are early.
Yeah.
Now it's conference games.
Now it's going to be a conference game. Right. You're going to have to eventually you're going to have to come out to Maryland or Rutgers in October, November.
If USC was in the conference this year, would they win the conference?
Probably not.
You'd get a USC Michigan game, probably.
If they, they would definitely. I don't even think they would win the West.
Who said they're going to the West?
What are you smoking?
Who would beat them in the West?
Who would beat them in the West?
I think
that means they would have to have 2 losses from the West.
I think you would get.
That would beat USC.
But USC got tripped up twice last year
by one team.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They played them twice. They played
Right.
at
They're beatable.
Utah and then played Utah.
Right, and in the
Utah.
Big
They
Ten,
are beatable.
so let's say, so in this scenario, USC plays Wisconsin, Wisconsin wins, both are one-loss teams, Wisconsin goes to the Big Ten championship game. Boom, USC doesn't go.
Who's Wisconsin losing to? Wisconsin's going to lose more than one game.
Or Wisconsin loses again, but I'm
the
just
thing.
saying, like you go, but like you would get but you're looking at two one-loss teams. Wisconsin would have the tiebreaker. Boom, head-to-head
But I'm saying
tiebreaker.
even
They
on
go.
the west side of the bracket, Wisconsin's losing more than one game. They have the talent to not.
I think if it
Just saying
depends
it
on
could
who
happen.
it depends on who USC would play in the championship game. I don't see USC losing to a lot of those mediocre teams. I could see them losing to Michigan and Ohio State and even maybe Wisconsin, but maybe even Iowa. But I don't see
Better than Penn State?
Iowa. No. First of all, I'm not high on Penn State this year. I think they're great and they could be good, but until I see James Franklin, Nick and I talk about this all the time. Until I see James Franklin win the big one, I can't trust Penn State. The
He
thing
beats
is,
USC to win the
fair.
big one.
That's fair.
to me, it's just USC has the best player in college football, and I think he's going to win games by himself. And I think if they play Ohio State or Michigan in the championship game, they might not win. But I think I definitely could see them being there and potentially. I mean, right now I would
If
say
Cliff
you're looking
Kingsbury
at. We
looks-
talk about Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. Those are the three teams that we think are going to win the Big Ten, right? Right. Those are the three teams. Okay.
Absolutely.
I think USC competes with all three of those teams on the field. If you put them on the same field, all three of those teams are going to be good games. I think USC could win all three of those games too.
I think that if you get that game, it's going to be the best conference championship game on TV, and it's probably going to cause the winner of that game to bow out first in the playoff. I think that would suck a lot out of whoever wins that game.
Well, that's the risk. That's the risk that we're taking now is
My
potentially
is,
with all these teams coming in is you're going to have
who's Lincoln Riley stopping on defense?
I don't know, but how many Big Ten teams
Iowa
can score
can't
40?
score.
Ohio State and Michigan could score 40, and our defense would hold them to under 35.
I would put them number 3 right below Ohio State and Michigan. The defense is like on paper, the defense should be fucking legit. But that goddamn Alex Grinch, man.
They just don't
not a good DC, I guess.
I just don't see USC being able to play, and that's going to be another thing is. So one other thing that I wanted to talk about real quick was, should the Big Ten drop big non-conference games? So like scheduling the likes of like Texas like in the future, dropping those types of teams.
Yeah, you can't afford that.
No, but what I'm saying though is like, what if they drop all those and you play an entire Big Ten schedule, a 12 games Big Ten schedule?
It's based on the ACC again. If the Big Ten gets more teams, then yeah, I could see an all Big Ten schedule, and I think that may be the way college football is going with these bigger conferences. Is you might just have all conference games, and you might see in the smaller.
Got to have an odd number. It's just going to make everything easier come into the year.
Yeah, but it's a tough thing because you have all these home and home scheduled already with, conferences and things like that. But those, it'll just be really interesting to see what happens. I think they should just play an all conference schedule. Personally, I
think they should
too. The Big Ten, if you have to play Oregon, UCLA, USC, and Washington for those games, and then you still have to play Maryland, Ohio State, Michigan. You have potentially seven top 25 teams that you're playing in a conference year, that if you win those 7 games, you're either undefeated or have 1 loss and playing for a national title.
I'm all for playing as many or more conference games as we can. But losing all non-cons would greatly hurt the G5 schools who halfway depend on those contracts to get their paydays.
And I think what you would see is
I feel bad for those guys.
And I think what you would see is 11-game conference schedule where your one non-conference team would be your in-state group of 5 team.
Yeah.
So where you would
still losing a lot of money. The G5s are still losing a lot of money. They would have to find a way to finance the G5s.
Yeah, I mean Michigan paid out a crap like $3 million last year for their first 4 games.
Yeah.
Well, right, but
that's how it should be. Mm-hmm. Big brother helping little brother.
Yeah, dude.
It won't be that way for much longer.
Michigan's paying $1 million to BG this year.
Well, Michigan has always tried to, and Michigan has always played like Central Michigan, Eastern Michigan. They've always tried to get. They've always tried to get an in-state.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Like
the
that
Big
so
Ten
that they
schools
can
are really good at that. The Big Ten schools are really good at playing MAC.
They are, and I think that would be your one non-conference game, though. I don't think you would see like you're no longer going to schedule your like Georgia's, Texas's, because why would you when you have to play when you're looking at a potential conference schedule of USC, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan State? Like, why would you just then throw yourself to the wolves of going against a Georgia that season too?
Just don't play FCS schools. If you're a P5 and you're playing FCS schools, you're a fucking pansy.
I think and that's bullshit that
Alabama. And that's the SEC's problem. Yep. That's the SEC as a whole but they are, I mean, like I said, they are financing those schools. So it is a good thing. But
it's bullshit that they get to play the Citadel.
Soft. Yeah. Play Sunbelt schools.
Well,
all right, dude.
That's all I had for you guys this evening. We went a lot longer than expected. Everybody take care. Thanks for coming out, and we'll see you guys later.
Deuces. More balloons for Corey.